Chris Lee, Blake Lovell, and Max Barr of Southeastern 14 here to preview and predict Kentucky's road trip to South Carolina. You can catch that on the SEC Network, 6 Central on Tuesday, January the 23rd. We do not have lines as we're doing this on Monday morning, but we averaged BPI, Bart Torvik, and Ken Pomeroy, Kentucky, close to a 3-point road favorite with about a 60% chance to win. A reminder, this prediction and preview brought to you by BetOnline. With NFL playoffs right around the corner and NBA season in full swing, BetOnline has you covered with all the up-to-the-second odds, news, and scores. With additional odds, lines, trends, and info on both desktop and mobile, you can access the world's best wagering information anytime. Head there today, get in on the action, see the updated odds. Remember to use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to get your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Gentlemen, I think this game is more interesting than any of us would have circled preseason. Kentucky got consideration for number one in our power rankings this week. Don't get started on that.
Not again.
Meanwhile, South Carolina has been the surprise team of the conference, I think, so far. Lamont Paris, I was in the room, tried to warn us at SEC Media Days. My team's better than you think it is. Gamecocks squarely in consideration for an NCAA tournament berth. And Blake, if Carolina were to get the upset, and let's not forget what happened in Lexington a year ago, although much different teams, much different circumstances, and maybe that plays to Kentucky's advantage because John Calipari can use that to remind his team, you cannot take these guys lightly, which if you're watching basketball, you're not anyway. Anyway, long preamble to say this is an interesting matchup between Kentucky and South Carolina. Oh, by the way, South Carolina should be without Miles Stute, and Kentucky did add a significant part to its rotation this weekend in case you were living under a rock.
Yep, they did. And I think it's interesting to note here, South Carolina, too, they have more, I think, a bit more fan support now that they're winning. So that's going to help the environment quite a bit here. I mean, anytime Kentucky comes to town, whether you're winning or losing, you should have a pretty good environment. But that is something I think is interesting to think about here because South Carolina has had such a good season that place will be rocking. Maybe unlike any home game they've had in quite a while, just based off of that. And so that will play a factor here, I think, for sure. And I do think South Carolina can do some things to make this game pretty interesting. Because again, we just keep saying with South Carolina, they just, they're down a player of the big four, as I like to call them. And you're thinking, all right, well, things could start to get a little rough here. And maybe they start to, go backward a little bit, but it really just hasn't happened. I mean, they won the game at Arkansas convincingly, like we said. We know the issues with Arkansas, but still a road win. They found a way to win a close game at Missouri in overtime. The Alabama game wasn't as pretty, but so I think it's an interesting setup here because they defend pretty well. You look at the 2-point field goal defense. Obviously, it's a strength of South Carolina from a percentage standpoint. They're only allowing teams to shoot 44.6%. It's top 20 nationally. Kentucky, a team that's going to make most of its points from the three, as we've seen, because of how well they shoot it. So, yeah, I like the matchup here. But Kentucky fans, hold your ears here, because this is one of those where if South Carolina's going to win, guess what? It's going to have to be a Meechie Johnson game. And unfortunately for Kentucky fans, they saw a Meechie Johnson game last year at Rupp Arena when he went off against them. And so we'll see if it's a similar scenario this season.
Yeah, at first glance, this game seems like we don't even need to do a breakdown. And then you go a little bit deeper into it and you're like, oh, okay, this could get a little bit interesting. One thing I'm really looking at is offensive tempo. Talk about polar opposites of how teams like to play. South Carolina dead last in the SEC by good margin in offensive tempo. They will just take every second of that half-court shot clock. And then Kentucky at number 2 in the conference, just blazing fast. I forget the exact stat, but the broadcast always brings it up about how they're something top of the country in shooting the ball within the first 10 seconds of the shot clock. So you have a team that likes to slow it way down against a team that likes to fly. Complete clash of styles. And being at South Carolina, I mean, we saw them do it to Alabama for a half. For that first half, that game was just half court against half court. So we have seen them in spurts be able to really impose their pace. Obviously, that got out of hand in the second half, but that was at Coleman. Another thing that I think just is a huge storyline is obviously is Studi being out, but is the emergence of Talon Cooper and how good he has been the past few games. I think Muss said that Cooper was the best player on the floor last game. Just rock solid defensively, complete game manager, always in control. And if there is one thing that the Kentucky defense does really well, it's protect the rim with all these 7-footers. But if there's one thing that has kind of been their Achilles heel, has been guard duos, a guard tandem. They have not been able to control the guards defensively. And if there's one thing that the South Carolina team has, is it's very good guards with Cooper and Johnson. So to the initial reaction, it looks like, whoa, this thing's gonna, we know who to pick on this one. But when you dive into it a little bit deeper, it's like, well, I can see some paths to how this thing might be scrappy and slow and kind of a game here.
Well, you guys mentioned two guys for South Carolina. Max, you just talked about the guy in Talon Cooper that's probably the most efficient point guard in the league. Blake, you brought up Meechie Johnson, who seems to be the put your team on your back and carry him kind of guy. He's won some games for South Carolina coming up big late. They also got BJ Mack, who's been really good lately. 18, 16, and 21 last 3 games working backwards with 9 rebounds to boot against Arkansas. So just missed a double-double. Now, here's where I think it starts to separate. It was already going to separate in the depth between these two teams anyway. Now Miles Studi is out. And as for Kentucky, Big Z, that was hard to watch and process. I mean, you're looking at an elite talent, but there's a lot of good players on this team. Somebody's going to have to sit for him to play. I don't know exactly how to process what I was looking at yet in terms of what that's going to look like going forward. But I do know this, guys. Once you get further down that roster, you see some separation. And I think, to me, I'll give you a little bit of hint about where I'm going. To me, that is where, and maybe it's a different dynamic because it's on the road, because we see some crazy stuff happen in SEC games. But to me, where Kentucky starts to separate from South Carolina is when you go further down the bench, because I think Kentucky's just got more parts. But to be fair, it's going to have more parts than just about anybody.
Yeah. I mean, look, we'll go back to the power rankings video. I told Max how this is going to work out. Like, South Carolina is going to grind this thing to where, they're going to have a shot here. And I think it's just the buy-in that Lamont Paris has gotten from this team. And again, even down Miles Studi, we've seen this before, a South Carolina team that rises to the occasion. We saw it in Rupp last year, different scenario, I know, but Meechie Johnson has stepped up in big games. We've seen other guys step up, BJ Mack, and so forth. And so, look, if you're a Kentucky fan, this game it should worry you a little bit, because I think, again, this is not the South Carolina team that everybody projected to be last in the SEC. Like, we're way removed from that now. They've proven they have what it takes to be a team that beats a Mississippi State at home. A team that, look, I mean, again, we still think Mississippi State's pretty good, but South Carolina made plays down the stretch, found ways to win that game. Studi had 15 in that one, but it was another Meechie Johnson game. He had 24. Mack didn't play great. Cooper didn't play great. They still found a way to win. I think the difference here is that South Carolina, I think, will have a chance to control the tempo, but I think, as we saw in the Alabama game, Kentucky and Alabama are very similar in their ability to just get out and go on a quick spurt run that just completely can send the game, off the rails if you're South Carolina. And I think we could see that here in this one. Again, I would not be surprised if this is close, but I just think Kentucky's offensive ability, and when they start to turn things up a little bit, in terms of the tempo. I know Kentucky has some defensive issues. We've talked about them, but I just feel like it's just hard for me to pick against Kentucky here just because I do think offensively they'll have enough, especially with Big Z added to the mix now. I think that's something too to think about.
Yeah.
We do pick on Kentucky from a defensive standpoint, and we have our fun with that and everything. And I try to ignore it. But with Big Z in the fold, I don't think we can underestimate, what is he going to add defensively too? Because what did we see him do in 16 minutes, right? He blocked 3 shots, he grabbed 5 rebounds, and I think if you're adding him to the mix, I feel like this is the same setup as we saw last year. Well, sorry, Kentucky fans, that may give you, it may not be what you want to hear, but South Carolina is going to have to hit a lot of threes here because I think it's going to be really tough for them to find a lot of looks. But that inside of it, but that's what South Carolina wants to do. Like that's, they're getting the large percentage of their points from there. So I pick Kentucky. I just feel like they'll find a way to separate themselves. But like I said, this one would concern me a little bit if I'm a Kentucky fan because clearly South Carolina's getting the buy-in. And yeah, this is one where if they control the tempo, you could see Kentucky get frustrated here. So,
Okay. So, from a betting standpoint, because I like to look at that angle a lot. This is the ultimate letdown spot for Kentucky, coming off of the euphoria of the Big Z party that was just on Saturday. So you do have that letdown spot on the road. And Blake, I like how you mentioned how South Carolina is going to treat this thing like their Super Bowl. That place is going to be rocking. Okay, it is. But this is a South Carolina defense that does not force any turnovers. They do not turn the other team over, just their defensive style. And this is a Kentucky offense that doesn't turn the ball over. So while, yes, I can definitely see South Carolina playing super slow and trying to take Kentucky out of their pace that they like to play, but over the course of 40 minutes, I think that this Kentucky offense is just too good to be stopped. The pace is going to be too much. They have too much coming off the bench. I'm going Kentucky here in what is going to be a scary one in my eyes.
That is not what I thought you were going to do. And Blake, that here, you have picked Kentucky, right? Is that your official pick?
That is correct. I picked Kentucky Wildcats, who are part of one of the best, groups of teams in the SEC. I think they belong in that conversation. So,
you're watching this. All right, that leaves it to me to either
just go all in here, Chris. Go all in. Go all in on your anti-Kentucky agenda. Just go with South Carolina. Go Lamont Paris, and just go all in now. Be the ultimate heel for the Kentucky Wildcats. It's time. It's time.
I'm the guy in this group who can think for himself and not get rattled by peer pressure.
What do you got?
Because I can think for myself, I look at this and I say, boy, Kentucky's got 3 7-footers. They can all play. What South Carolina got returned? Got BJ Mack. He's a little bit shorter than those guys. They got Josh Gray, who had to play a little bit more, which I don't think was the plan until Studi got hurt. I look at Kentucky's offensive firepower. I see Rob Dillingham putting up an offensive rating of 41 against Georgia, and Kentucky still won the game by scoring 105 points. Talent wins out, gentlemen. South Carolina, we've outlined the recipe to where it can make it close, slow it down. And this team is capable of doing it, but give me talent. I will take Kentucky. So with that, you're welcome, South Carolina, because anytime we all go against one team unanimously, and I think especially when it's in that one team's building, that does not end well for you. So,
well, listen,
Lamont Paris, you are welcome for us guaranteeing a South Carolina victory.
There are no guarantees for anybody on the road in the SEC. I don't care who you are. And I think, like we said, we could find that out this week with the top 3 teams because all 3 of these teams play every game on their schedule this week away from home. And so Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee, they're all 3 on the road this week. So I tend to think somebody's losing, as I said in the power rankings. I don't know who it's going to be, but it's just I tend to think somebody's losing a game this week, and it may be Kentucky,
I think we
South
just
Carolina.
spoke it into existence.
Well, we'll see. Like I said, I don't think, like Max said it, it's a tough spot for Kentucky. I do believe that based on South Carolina, and who knows? Maybe we look up and we're like, man, for some reason Lamont Paris just has Kentucky's number. He beat them last year with a team that was nowhere near as good as this one. And maybe he does it again here. Maybe he's got the formula. But we're picking games. We can't see the future. If we're going to pick games based on what we've seen at this point, yeah, I think it makes sense why we would all lean towards Kentucky. But we'll see. This should be an interesting one.
All right. Hope you had fun watching it. We're going to have fun watching the actual game. If you want to see more of our stuff, we do SEC basketball content virtually every day. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell a friend. For Blake Lovell and Max Barr, I'm Chris Lee. This is Southeastern 14 presented by Bet Online.